flexibility in what the actual solution is instead of full replacement.
We want to know, yeah, what the recommendations are, and then the board can assess before we move to the second stage of the RFP, what we want to do. If everyone comes back with the same problem, I think it's easier for us to know.
Right.
If
It's a
that,
matter of there might be different solutions and a different cost base.
And some people have problems.
Well, you're not being that here. That's why I want to make sure
yeah,
we understand what's really causing the problem.
yeah, I mean, the other option we talked through is just having one expert come in, do a really thorough inspection and evaluation. We had to pay that, and then they would give us the solution, and then we did that. That was the second option, but that, we know that assessment would be thousands of dollars. So, that's what came back with maybe this proposal.
Can I ask, you may get to this later. If somebody's gonna respond to an RFP saying that the scope was repairing it to its original installation, what is that? And are these people working from specs of the original, which clearly may be somewhat tenuous? I mean, Bob will respond to an RFP to get something like it was originally installed. What am I being evaluated? Now you got a bunch of tasks in there, which may be part of what you're doing. But I hope this isn't a dumb question, but if you're gonna respond, how do you know when you're responding to the right thing? Does that make sense?
It does.
And the design build proposal, did you get a full set of plans fast?
I know we asked for it. I can let, very actually, I know that we asked for, who was the contractor that built it out? Did this go through, permitting, and do we have the original plan? And I think we don't have that information, right?
I can get you the name of who was the contractor that built it out, because we did go down that path.
That they're out of business, or?
I think they are.
That's what I found.
But they didn't require a signed seal set of plans.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if,
I can go so far as to pay the building departments to try to get whenever I can. And basically it was just, here's the person who did it, and it was done with best practices. Best practice is not necessarily a standard thing. Best practice in one spot could not necessarily be best practice in another.
We did have a delay on the recording of this meeting, so I'm just going to let everyone know online if they were to watch this later. The first few minutes of this meeting were missing from the video clip. We just started the meeting off. We do have quorum of the committee with the full service area committee sat at the table, as well as the Jacob, your general manager with town hall, your service area director and service area admin. We're starting on discussion item 1. So with that, we can make those a comment, or we can do that and adjust the RFP to have the
Mandatory walkthrough.
mandatory walkthrough. Thank you. And to also define what installing to original. That, I want to say the intent behind that was more regarding the landscaping itself, because we wanted to ensure that this project, with ripping up all the ground, ensures that whoever's ripping it up is also reinstalling all the landscaping. But I think that word landscaping isn't there, and that is contradictory to, if we're putting the pipes back to original intent, then we don't need to do anything at all, because that's how they are.
So you're looking to whether or not they're going to replace or just repair? When they bid on this, correct? Here's my concern with this. You're going to have a bunch of people bidding on it, which I'm sure now is going to probably take another year and a half before we come to the conclusion on who's going to do the job. Now you're going to do the job, and when Exquisite or whatever damages a pipe or a sprinkler head, now we have to find this person to come in and repair it, because Exquisite not getting the account isn't going to repair it. So now they come in, they go to repair it, and we're going to get a lot of, well, I didn't do this originally. The problem you're having was from the original installation. So how far do you go when they do the work that we can be confident that we're going to fix it and that's it? Because as you started the meeting saying, this has been like ridiculously too long of an issue.
That's the beginning.
And, and it's ridiculous that it's gotten so out of hand. even with this. I mean, I understand you've exhausted all of these, but I mean, Matabee screwed up. And eventually, all the homeowners are gonna pay the price for their screw up. And also, what's not fair about this are the homeowners that aren't having problems. They're gonna end up, because I assume this is coming from the fund, right? I mean, so this is something, you know, I think to take very seriously. You know, I mean, are we better off taking legal action with Matabee? I mean,
I mean, many.
what do we do?
Many homeowners have been expressing the fact that it hasn't been right from the beginning, from the day that we moved in.
Yeah.
From the day we moved in, we've been complaining about it and to GM, to everybody that we can complain and nothing got done. So of course now it's out of warranty, so to speak. The performance bond is exhausted because it's now no longer valid. And now we have to pay the price, and this is the frustration, not only for the committee, but for everyone who owns a townhome, especially if we have to have a special assessment.
Basically, like for us, our lawn is, I mean, dead, it's gone. So when you fix it, we need lots and lots of
We
replacement.
need more.
And that's only because we've let it go that long. This is servicing fix.
So let me water it.
You know, they're out there with the hoses watering the tree just to keep it alive because we know that, you know, that's a large expense to replace. I mean, you know,
Especially-
God forbid we have a bad hurricane season. You could exhaust whatever you have in, you know, in funds. I mean, come on.
Outside, what were the terms of maintenance when it was first set up? Was there a year-long warranty that they lived through? Who has that maintenance agreement now? Is it all exquisite just under the general landscaping understanding, or how's that work?
It would have been tied to the turnover of the building.
Okay.
So as those buildings were turned over, it would have been everything was responsibility of Matabee until the turnkey, then all responsibility switches over to the association.
Because I would argue that, you know, I watch whoever's maintaining the lawns every week, and, you know, they create their own damage sometimes. How many times have the telecom box has been ripped off and no one touches them? And there's a lot to that. They create their own problems. I'd be curious to find out what the ultimate answer is on why it's failing. And it's not just the townhomes, it's around the lake, it's all kinds of places that they have problems.
Mhm.
And there's also been frustration voiced that we were told the townhomes had to be turned over. And why were they turned over if the irrigation wasn't proper?
So to that, it was,
I know it's the Disney company that pushed it, but then when you're pushing it off on townhomes, the owners.
so I
And
can,
Pro is taking no responsibility and won't even cost share.
I can only say that on that, you know, we have added in the reports or when we move forward on any turnovers to investigate or to check the pipes before they're covered up.
Which is wonderful, but that doesn't start.
Did they have a 1-year warranty walkthrough and confirm that everything was operational?
After the turnover,
What was the agreement after they were complete? Was there a 1-year installation warranty or anything?
to my knowledge, when everything was accepted at turnover, it was turned over in working condition. So they wouldn't have accepted a turnover with pending
Well,
items.
even Matabee has their own warranties on the houses that they came back for a year and did. So it seems that same agreement should be understood.
This working order doesn't always mean properly.
I think there's a missing piece to this.
And also then what constitutes that you exhausted? Possibly wasn't the Matabee said no, when they're like, okay, we exhausted it, they said, no, we're not gonna do anything. I mean,
With Matabee, that was, you know, we researched into that to understand the design plans, because the design plans said 1-inch pipe and it was laid at the 3/4 inch, then we knew we could challenge there. That's when we went to the route of going to the subcontractor and understanding the subcontractor did not need to provide the schematics of that.
Mhm.
That's where that route ended.
okay,
But we have asked for continued looking into that, not just because the plans aren't there, doesn't mean we shouldn't continue a conversation with Matabee to try to get them to pay for this.
We can continue trying.
Yes.
Mhm.
So I think that's what everybody is saying is don't just take it, they didn't have the plan, so now they're not responsible. They didn't have the warranty, so now they're not responsible is.
They still do damaged goods and
We
things
still have to continue to pursue that.
And you
So
got
once
once
we
somebody
receive
receive
the-
and use damaged goods, so to speak. You know, I don't know.
So once we receive the bids back and we understand the full cost or scope and cost of the project, that is when we can
revisit.
revisit the matter.
And I wonder if you should wait until then, right? So is there something that we can do in parallel? Because if you wait, that's now additional time that we have to wait. Now, the conversations with Matt may have to be had. So are there some preliminary conversations that can be had, that they can be told, this is what's happening, this is what we're doing, and we're gonna continue conversations. I know that it's good to go with dollars. I just know that if we spend 2 months going through this RFP to then talk to Maggie, it's another time period that we have to wait.
Right, but then
To get them.
if it goes into litigation, it's gonna be a lot longer than that. And do you wanna wait, a year and a half to 2 years to install while you're waiting the outcome of litigation?
That's why I'm saying we should be talking
You
to
need
Maggie now.
We can do that.
Do the repairs first and
Do that.
Start conversations with.
Now, let's see here. Any other items that you wanted adjusted in this RFP, as our goal would be to launch this RFP so we can start.
So let me look for, do you have the letter that we sent you with the different things that we were suggesting?
The RFP is being sent to further out than just
Oh, yeah,
us,
that's
on the intent, right, and within, I mean, it's being sent to much further distance. and-
Orange, Lake County.
Yes. So that it's not just local kinds of things that it will.
In the back.
I don't know if I find
That one in the packet?
Oh, the list. Yes, so we provided, and this is a preliminary list that we have on the very last page of this. It has 6 different irrigation companies in the area from Kissimmee, Davenport, Lake Wales, Horizons West, Winter Garden, and Winter Haven. I know Christian also has a few additional ones that he has been working very closely with. These are ones that Lauren and I.
Additionals.
Yes. Mhm. And once we launch RFPs, we launch them on the website as well. So if anyone in your service area or a friend knows Joe, Bob, and they know someone, you can reference them to the website to find the RFP that's available for anyone to bid on, not just the list that we send it out to.
Chris, you don't have a copy of the PDF that we sent?
Oh,
Yes, I'd like to make sure that we go through those points and those are. Laws of memory.
Send on, here we are.
I've got it, I can go through it.
Can you go through?
Alright, so the precondition, one of the preconditions we talked about is discussing the CDD. Before we even started the RFP, which I think, do we understand, their responsibility? And now that we understand too, that the easement situation where all the pipes are now Island Village and CCDD, do we need their input?
Yeah, because the irrigation is not in any part of us, CDDs.
So we own it, even though it's in their part of it.
Well, it impacts their trees that they maintain, they're responsible for. They're also responsible for the sidewalk. So any of that work that's being done around and under the sidewalk that could impact the things that they're responsible.
Yeah, and I think our request is that to make sure that someone is notified and ask if they would like to have input.
They can determine they don't need to, but we would like to bring it to their attention that we're doing this. So that they don't come back later to us and say, you did mess up the tree and now we're not responsible. You're going through the last question and answer piece stuff.
No, I'm just going through the, and I know that was one item that we had touched base on, but we didn't have final confirmation.
Because it was, the pipes would be going underneath the sidewalk, so that affects CBD.
That I know that they'll have no issue with, we do that quite often with different runs of irrigation, under sidewalks with other service areas or pro facilities, that's not an issue.
The other issue, that we brought
What
up
was
as
the last?
a precondition was, had to do with the pump for phase two, and I think got an answer on that. That we know what the timing is, but we don't know what the outcome will be until after it's installed, but that's something we want to make sure we pre-notify anyone doing it.
So is that something that we can confirm that the director, when he does, I would imagine that he's the one that's gonna do the facilitations, right?
Our
Facilities,
facilities director.
he's gonna go out with it and explain things to the vendors.
Yes, because another concern is by doing this at this point, is we are trying to also combat, it's not just for the issues we see now, but the issues we see in the drought season in the spring that we expect to continue year after year after year. So we don't want to solve just for now, we want to solve for when we understand we're going to start receiving low pressure from the Toho water districts. That's where our issues really started exacerbating. So that's where we know where heads weren't popping out of the ground, and that's where it really just expanded this issue. So that's also included in what we want to do with those walks, because at some point of the day, depending on the pressure is currently, you can walk out there to do an assessment and everything operates exactly the way it's supposed to. That is an issue, and that was the kind of the one concern we had if we did go out and do more requests, is in the season, they're gonna show it looks fine. When we know it doesn't work fine.
And the smallest issue would be, we need another extra head here and there. Because the coverage is not good.
And we can't add more heads because all that's gonna do is reduce them.
And then that's part of the issue, but we don't really know, we know it's exacerbating the issue, we don't know if that's the root cause or if there's other issues. That's part of why we want this evaluation to be done.
And that's why we wanted to make sure that they know about the different pump, because that additional pump might initially change things, but then once
so they
phase two gets
agree.
rolled out, it starts constricting the water again, so
Mhm.
they should just be aware of our irrigation infrastructure.
I think that's another note to see, when we have a conversation with them too, just, that's another interest intersection point. As long as I think they're responsible for the pump and the installation timing.
They'll be responsible when the pump is turned over to ECD. Right now, the pump is built, not turned on, because it's still under control of the county.
I understand, but they'll eventually own it.
Yeah.
Manage it and be responsible for it.
Will there be eventually additional pumps for the additional phases?
To my knowledge, no, the second pump is almost fine.
Okay,
I can ask them that.
yeah, I think that's just gonna be important.
And this is turnover of the pump to ECDD, will that go through the same level of scrutiny that we're not now trying to add when they do turnovers? Like, is somebody gonna look at that and say, let's look at what this, is looking like now that you're turning over the pump too?
We can advise them a bit of CDD.
ECDD, yeah.
What's your hammer in terms of they turn it over? What's your role and responsibility, and then just say, okay, thanks, see you later?
The turnover.
What's your process when they turn over something?
When they turn over one of the buildings to us, we bring in a third-party structural engineer that reviews the building. At this point, only once, I think they've reviewed it 5 times over. On that review, we also bring our landscaping company, your landscaping company, to ensure that it's meeting requirements on that. And so when it gets turned over, we don't have to replace a dead bush if the grass is failing, all of those types of items. And then our director of facilities, we also take the service area team and either myself or the executive director against those. The final sign off takes place by the civil engineer. Just through Karen's engineer. And that is just for this committee and for your service area on the board workshop tomorrow night, the request to have ROA cover the engineering costs on future turnovers, as it's scoped to be the cost of service area. I know we've had a discussion in the past to ask the boards to cover that,
Thank you.
like borough funds, and that is a discussion item.
Fine.
Going forward, so the phase one of the evaluation, we had 3 bullets. One of them was, for the vendors to conduct a visual inspection and walk through the site. We recognized as an activity with the committee. Assess the visible performance issue, that includes dry zones, faulty units, and coverage gaps, among other things. And then, we wanted to have system testing and validation, including formal pressure testing, roller diagnostics. System on us, I think, we went back and forth on, making sure that someone from Fair Advantage is available, they need to have access and get that access. And then phase 2 is when, after we evaluate, and get recommendations back on what these vendors think the problem is and their proposed solutions, and then we go into, the next phase, where we get, their professional opinion on the likely cause, the recommended solutions, so what the work is, provide a preliminary cost estimate, which we said is a phased approach, and I think we meant by that in terms of cost, right? If we do this, we probably need to have a multi-phase cost approach. Key requirements, we want to make sure that we, vendors understood that we wanted references, at least 2, and then, earlier the comment about, a warranty, right? We want to make sure there's a warranty so that you can't have someone like our existing landscape to say, hey, this is still broken, this doesn't work. There needs to be a warranty period to ensure that, so.
What's reasonable for that?
What's that?
What's reasonable for that, the period?
I mean, I'm not sure.
2 years.
We're hoping that 2 years is reasonable, but.
I would ask, okay, I would say that you would identify a 2-year minimum as the base. If you want to identify what the cost is for an additional year, per year moving forward.
Who's doing the irrigation now for phase 2?
Well, that needs to doing the building.
Yeah, they must be doing it.
They-
It's a subcontractor, but we don't know who it is.
Maybe he should be bidding on this as well.
That's.
That's a good point.
We can find out who that is from that.
Less.
Amazing.
Same one.
Good in the last one. It'll be good to know.
So from the
I mean, it's gonna be good anyway for this to just review, say, oh, I now understand their issue, let's
Exactly.
not continue to build this issue.
Exactly.
Not.
Lessons learned are good.
So from the references perspective, I know that you had one line item in there that said references as far as how we evaluate the RFP. But we wanted to make sure that we called out to the vendors that are responding that for them to provide at least 2,
Yes.
and they would be a similar project. It's not, a vendor that's done landscaping or done sprinkler as only. So they have to have done a similar job. Yes. That's important.
I think that was everything on that.
What were the last 2 again? There was the warranty. We also had.
References that mark.
We also had the post installation, protocol.
What
Post installation,
post?
post installation protocol, like once you install this, what is?
Post RFP implementation committee to
Yeah.
select, or that was post RFP implementation, which would committee to select a vendor. So,
Yes.
so that, how that would go is the committee would provide a recommendation.
Let me go back. The vendor, when they're responding to RFP, is for them to include what their protocol is to after they install.
Will they
and
maintain?
implement, how they're going to verify that it's working within X amount of time. So they're warranting it for 2 years, but for the first 90 days, are they coming back out? How are they testing that it's working?
Regular inspections, how that period, what's the finding?
Ensure satisfaction.
To show working as
Working on.
So that's everything from the RFP perspective.
Also, I think
We have more
We also-
things.
Now,
slight discussion on will our landscaper be maintaining this? Will the installer be maintaining?
Because that's gonna be the one, like with the weed whacker, they hit a line or they break their head, who's gonna fix this?
They did the buildings and they bring the plaster, so are they?
Those types of-
Situation.
Those types of replacements are done by your landscaper at no cost to the association.
Well, just say there's a head breaks.
Mhm.
Is the landscaper responding?
Landscaper. Unless it's an ongoing issue of the pressure.
that's covered by the existing contract we have with them.
Mhm.
And that would not change if we replace the system. That's a good system.
Your heads, so basically now you're talking above ground.
Yeah.
Is in your landscaping contract. Okay. And ongoing maintenance of above ground infrastructure.
Makes sense.
So the warranty, you're really talking about under the ground issues, correct?
And that's really where our issues lie right now.
Yeah, I mean, longevity of that's not gonna
If that's.
be that. No, I'm saying once they fix it and it really is working right.
Right.
2, 3, that's not gonna be, it's always gonna be the things you see are the things that are gonna break. So, I wouldn't worry too much.
Alex like, yeah, maybe.
Well, unless you're gonna dig for a swimming pool or something.
So we had also asked, you did give us this there, you'll send those to us, of who the people are, who the vendors are. Like, that's them.
There are those, gonna get back to you.
Okay, oh, excellent, sorry, so yeah, okay, so yeah, 5 to 10, so you've got 6, that's good, and are these certified? Irrigation, or are they, what is their? Just
I'll
all,
need to double check on all those certifications, but they are predominantly irrigation based companies.
they are,
Mhm.
okay, but you didn't validate if they were certified.
No, typically, and I'll just add that in there, provide the certification documentation and this RFP. That's what we'll do. That way it's on them to make sure they provide it to us.
Listen, Amy.
Yeah, it is. It says all applicable license certificates must be included. It's in this bullet thing.
So exquisite is not on here. Wouldn't this entire RFP go to exquisite as well?
We would send it to us with it.
Yes, oh, okay. So you are. Sure, because they need to answer the same set of questions. Let's see.
And this is also, you send it to them, it's their choice when they choose to apply.
And they don't usually still request that we find a bit. That was in writing, but
Okay.
And you're able to send us the final one after you got it. Based on
we're
the.
adding these.
Sorry.
So this would be adding, in phase 1, a site visit and walkthrough along with pressure testing. Provide at least 2 references of similar work. Provide a warranty period, ideally of 2 years.
Now,
Add providing a post.
Option for additional years against that base.
Hmm.
Option for additional years against that base.
That we would pay for additional.
Yeah, it's fine, but when you want that,
No,
or at least the opportunity to see, yeah, you want to see what that number is.
Extended warranty.
Say an annual extended, yeah. Per year.
Okay. Add providing a post installation protocol to ensure satisfaction and in working order. Add in landscaping and the return to original design. And then adding that to sending that we're sending the RFP to Madamy's current subcontractor as well as Exquisite.
Could we consider separating the cost, and it probably would be naturally. But separating the cost of the landscape redo from anything that's part of your irrigation. Meaning, what if Brian, because he has economies of scale, he has already his, the vendors that he goes to, his replacing sod and things that get damaged might be less expensive for us than an irrigation company that might have to subcontract out to the landscaper. So I'm just wondering if we can ensure that that's separated and we might be able to make a choice not to do that.
Yeah,
Brian
but
shows.
not only that, but then you're changing the whole scope of what you're doing. You're wanting them to bid on a job, and now you're saying, well, we'll take your bid for this part of it and use somebody else for this part of it. So then the two have to be
I agree.
coordinated, and you're gonna cause more
Yeah,
issues.
I think
without
everything landscaping should be the
Yeah.
one stop even.
I mean, there at least, we should have those numbers as it would be expected at a response to an RFP like this, that the bid is itemized. So we would see the itemization of costs, and
Mhm.
the costs incurred for the irrigation and the costs for the landscape replacement. And then usually more than just a bulk sum on that, what it would look like.
Mhm.
I'm assuming that we're not gonna get a hard number on landscape replacement, or get maybe this is our rates per something like this, as far as we will charge this amount for sod, or this amount for plants, and we're estimating this, but we'll want to put a cap on that, or have them provide something that basically ensures that they're not, if they only need to rip up, really, if they only need to rip up 5 square feet, but if it's not in their contract to replace, they may rip up 20 square feet. We want to make sure we put some
They
protections.
should repair what they destroyed, basically. But the tear out should be replaced.
Then you've got a little bit of a conflict, I'm just throwing this out. The conflict between Brian says, okay, I'm responsible for all this except for this piece of the sod.
Once it's
And-
installed, once it's reinstalled, he's responsible.
Because
Once you are asking them to do a job, once their job is done, they have been done, everything, then your landscapers, it continues to.
Then they maintain.
They maintain their, he's not going to, he has taken on the full landscaping. It's not now, well, they put that in. No, he's taking on the responsibility. We've had to have some work done, but he's now taking that back. Once it's replaced.
Gotcha. So here's my point. Today, exclusive when they do replacement of trees and plants, there's different warranties based on what it is, right? For how long he will warranty that plant.
Yeah.
Okay,
You
so
will have
then,
no warranties on any plant materials, they're not the landscape provider. I can almost guarantee you every response on case won't warranty the plants.
that's what I'm saying. So that's exactly what I'm bringing up.
If the sod fails, then we'll have to pay for that again.
And it's same as when like CBD, we're having this issue elsewhere, CBD is replacing sidewalk. It means when they do that, they have to replace sod next to the sidewalk in a service area. They throw sod down, it fails because
And they wash their
reason they didn't alert us that to change our irrigation. They laid sod.
And that's exactly why I'm bringing this up, because exclusive does guarantee what they replace. And if it messes up within, I can't remember what it is, 30 days, 90 days, he replaces it at his cost, not ours. So that would prevent that from happening. And if
So my suggestion on that is we still move forward with the RFP as is. Once we start to receive bids back, if we start to see some real good differences or some separation between the projects and landscape replacement, we can then, now that we've had this and we understand the scope of the project, we can start discussions with preferred vendor selections of this to take that landscaping line out of the project. That provides you risk of now they might make more damage. However, if we take that out and then you can say, well, we want to use our landscaper to do this, but you provide the numbers. Thank you for providing that. We can then do that as an option to then allow for warranty replacements.
Just a good option.
Yeah, just as option. That's a discussion later down the road. As we are now 4:45, I want to switch unless there's any final items. I think we're in a good spot on the RFP. We have a few action items to adjust to send back out to the committee for their input, and then we can get that launched. I hope we can think we can do this by end of week, so we can get it launched by end of week and sent to vendors. Like I said, there's usually we do a 30-day window for this, so we can allow time for them to come on, schedule time to come on site and then to provide responses back. So if we can do that, we're looking about mid-September to have, probably September 19th would be what we request responses back by. So we can have conversations. Actually, we're looking at scheduling your what quarter is that? Q3 quarterly meetings, the week of the 22nd, which is the following week. So if we can get this out in time by the end of this week, right?
Also, coincide, okay.
Yeah, so instead of a meeting like this, we can have these discussions inside your,
Don't just schedule a little bit longer. So it's just George.
I'll jump on the call. Okay, so we'll make those to the RFP and get that over to you and then for your input and before we send that out. Now, these are just preliminary conversations about how we fund the project. I want to start off there, but they're preliminary just so we can understand what we're looking at and moving forward. As of about July 1st, since we don't have the July's final numbers yet. July 1st, your operating balance was just over 10,000. Your reserve balance is at 140,000. That was your operating cash is close to about 1 month's worth of operating expenses at around 11,000. That's it's not ideal. So we'd ideally hold 3 to 6 months of cash in your operating fund. So it's as low as we want to go on there. It shouldn't have an issue as far as what that means for your allocations monthly to your reserve so that we're getting your reserve contributions. It shouldn't have any issues with being able to pay bills that are inside your budget to pay for. What it does mean though, is that you don't have any buffer money in your operating fund. Why I share that is sometimes these projects, or if you have buffers, it allows a little more room to play where I know that was where we just, as a committee had some email conversation on if we wanted to bring some vendors out just to provide more recommendations on, let's pay a contractor to come out and provide a full diagnostic. While we know that might only be $1,000 or $2 at this point, we can't, there's no funding in your operating to allow that. Let's look over in your reserve funds to see what we can do inside the reserve. Now, anything that we do with the reserve needs to be attached to a corresponding reserve line. Irrigation is a reserve line in your reserve, so meaning we can't touch your reserves for this. However, irrigation system replacement is a line that's only funded every 30 years, and we're not close to that. There is some irrigation controllers coming up in the next couple of years with some light funding on that. All that to say, that yes, you can use reserves to cover these expenses because it is a reserve item. That said, at $140,000 at your current reserve balance, we're looking at ending your year at around $197,000 in your reserves. If every monthly allotment is made in full, when they're not, that builds up an interfund asset line that's currently at 48,000. So there's been one of that might have been an auditor adjustment that we've seen 2023, but additional is if that $10,000 in your operating account is not enough to cover all of the bills when the monthly pull to your reserves, because you make an annual reserve contribution, but that comes out monthly. If there's not enough in there, it'll pull what is available, and then the rest, it goes as an IOU on that interfund asset line. So that's what I'm gonna say. At the end of the year, we hope that the contribution reaches a level of 197,000 at your expected year-end balance of the reserve, if we are able to make those full monthly allocations. The reserve funding plan, as provided by our reserve advisors, has an anticipated balance by the end of 2025 at $587,000. So we're just about $400,000 shortfall looking at the year end. We assumed this about last year when we received the reserve study. Reviews are done for the next 30 years, but there was never one done for Island Villages. This was the first one that was coming online to do, as we do them every 3 years. So that's why we knew we saw this deficit last year. It was right at the end of our budgeting process, and that's what resulted in an increase to your assessment dues last year was to do as much as you can up to a 20% increase to be able to combat this shortfall. As we look into next week, we have a meeting about the budget where we'll discuss how that does with dues, but we wanted to go through that little synopsis of the finances to say, as it currently states, there's not funding on either of the accounts to pay for this. Even if we wanted to pull from the reserves, it's already short in that sense where we're looking at not having funds for critical items as roof or paint, as those are often have to be reserved as the priority items in your reserves. We did some background research as we did not, we want to do everything we can to avoid a special assessment. And there's still options that we can look at, and depending on what these RFP prices come back at, we still can. That said, the RFP isn't off the table, just as where we also pulling funding from. We did look at, and I reached out to some of our corporate advisors from the Director of Community Association Manager, our Vice President of Finance, to say, hey, are we knocking on the door? Are we looking at this all right? Am I missing anything at all? Is there anything we do? Because the last thing you want to do is a special assessment. And even worse is a special assessment for irrigation, not even a roof or something of major expense. That's usually where we would see something. Unfortunately, those conversations came back saying, no, the situation you're in is sound, and that's exactly a plausible path for you. I wouldn't go that route in case we went this and then we brought it to them later on and they said, oh, whoa, you could have done it this other way. As far as how that process looks, that's mainly a board-driven process, is running your special assessment with your Pro board, but we can start these conversations. Now, that being said, there's a positive side to this on the sense of timeline. When we talk timeline, special assessment is an extensive process, as that does go into, it adjusts the resale of the home, it gets tied to your property record as a debt to the property. But what we can do, because we don't want to not do this project until there's funds, because you do have funds in your reserves, you can use them to start the project. And we can start this RFP, we can do this in September. If everything looks good, we can take to the board. And if, let's say we find something out, we get a good price, it's ideally out the door, maybe $30,000 for the whole project. That would be great. We run through, we do that, we use the money from your reserves, but now we have a different problem. We can do a special assessment to cover the cost of this project, as well as provide some replenishment of funds to your reserves as far as the catch-up game in the same time. So if we want to say it's going to be just $30,000, you can do a special assessment for that. There's an option to do it for $60,000, so you can do that and provide a catch-up on your reserves to help catch up this $400,000 shortfall here. Those can be done up to 2 payments. So we can do those, and what it would look like is like the worst case that you could do it where, let's say it's a $2,000 a home assessment. That's going to bring in $122,000 to your community. Maybe you're going to use half of that for this project, and half of it is just going to fund those reserves. You can do that, and we
can't just do it to fund the project.
You can just do it to fund the project, and that's an option as well. You're just
And
gonna
that would
look
be
at,
based on a per home or per square footage that people have in their.
it would be whatever you want that dollar amount to be divided by the amount of properties.
So it would be equal distribution, which is unfair.
Equal distribution is the only thing that works in a community
Square footage.
of yards. These are common area spaces, they're common expenses that cannot be assigned per property.
So no one owns their property.
As far as the common area.
Common area is the lawn in front of your home. That's a common area.
Mhm. No, so let's say the one, if a yard is bigger and it needs more irrigation work, and then some yards don't have any, it would still be an equal assessment for every door in the association.
Not quite fair.
There's no way around that. I mean, that would be saying, and the same with dues, if I have a family of 5 and I'm using the pool, or I don't have kids at all, I'm not paying, why am I paying for this?
That's the community.
But
Have any other towns done it, that's not? Recently, like last 2 years or
no.
5 years?
No, I can go back and see, I think we might have had one right before Grand Manors, Royal Manage took over. I need to check on one property to see, and that was for a roofing project,
So
if it was.
the reserves can be used as collateral. You can't use the reserves, but they can act as collateral against an assessment that ultimately gets paid back. Is that, did I understand that right?
In this case, yes, because this line fits within your reserve expenditure items. Since irrigation is already a line identified in your reserves that you can use money for, yes.
It's basically like if you just overspend on any line, you just kind of overspend a little bit, it's like overspending a lot, but then now you kind of find a way to replace it. That's basically what you're saying, or?
But if
This is a special assessment to replenish your reserves due to an accelerated reserve expense. So if you have money in your reserves in 2050 to do this project, you have funding to relay all of the pipes in your irrigation system, but it's in 2050. So what this special assessment would be is because you're advancing funds. Now you're not gonna be able to do a roof project, so it would just be to do that. That's what it would be, and that's why you are allowed to use your reserves. If this is due to, wouldn't make sense. If this is due to electrical, let's say, I mean, or water, let's say this is all about a water, something happened and we had a $30,000 water bill. Water is not a reserve expense ever, so you cannot ever use your reserve money to pay a water because that's an operating expense on it. This one can't, but so that's why it allows us to start the project, start down the process of this, and then to look at how do we now. Yes, so then this, while you campaign this as it's for the irrigation system, inevitably what the special assessment is for your reserves. It's a reserve special assessment.
it's allowing us to move forward on this project with the promise, for lack of a better word, to replenish some sort of assessment. That's really what's going on.
That's only because that assessment takes a long time to do, and if we want to start ahead of time, we're kind of borrowing from our reserve funds and then just paying back.
Yeah, so once the board would approve and gets everything lined up and go through, the pro general counsel, the real managers general counsel, and it's all approved by the board, it still takes an additional 45 days to enact it and to get it registered on the accounts. Then it can be, you can set up when the payments are due. What I was advised by our corporate finance team is to have these special assessment payments not around the holiday season, as that can often bring delinquencies, and that's not what your association wants. We can do this process and start it all now, run this, get this approved by the board in, let's say, October, November, and start the process to get everything signed and sealed and delivered for this. When are you going to feel it on your dues? When is the special assessment hit? We can do it, like I said, up to 2 expenses. And so you could do it. The recommendation was the start of Q2 and the start of Q3. So you could do, then you have if you were trying to pull at this point, if you went to do only $66,000 of funding, it would be a $500 special assessment, April 1st, $500 special assessment, August 1st, July 1st.
And an additional payment.
I think we need to look at that schedule you provided for the reserve study, right? On how we were going to build up the reserve through time. And we had talked about an aggressive approach, which is what had been recommended, capped at 20% increase every year, right? And we had said, well, can we also look at an alternative to that on how we can build up that reserve fund, maybe not so aggressively, because now you're adding another 20%, we just did another 20% increase, we're gonna do another 20%. Probably gonna have to do that for the next 5 years.
Which is the same.
And plus the 6,000, it's a lot, so
No, it's
I
understandable.
think that to.
That'll be discussed, yeah, Ray is preparing that for your budget.
And then really, obviously, after hearing this, we definitely want to do something. We have to try to go after Matt.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. That's absolutely.
We'll do that.
It's the only fair thing, they need to repair.
Somebody was negligent here.
Yeah, I think even before we need something already dramatic, saying they will not warranty it and they will not, because if we have to go for assessment, we need something.
There's nothing to stop you from continuing the RFP and launching that, if you're not binding yourself to anything.
Right. I'm just saying for an assessment.
Yes, Charles?
Hey, are there, sorry, I've been listening and I apologize for that. I had a work call. Are there opportunities in the operational fund to pause? I'm trying to think of things that would not be
No,
mission
the answer is
critical.
no.
Well, hold on. Pressure wash. So I understand like we have budgets for 2 pressure washings and things like that. Are there potentially things that could be reclassified as non-essential to,
One pressure wash, one.
There are things we can look at it with that, but that amount is nominal compared.
Yeah,
to
I mean,
Whatever that helps too.
that's,
No,
so
I mean,
mean,
since you have less you have roughly 1 month's worth of expenses in your operating account as cash right now. So it's already operating at the most bare minimum. At this point, we typically already start pausing any landscape projects. We already have paused landscape projects with this service area due to the fact that we don't want any landscape to die because of no watering. But that's typically the first line that we do cut. We have some other service areas that are in the same situation with just no buffer in their operating fund. And so the first thing we do is that year, try to work as conservatively we can out of those operating lines in the operating funds. Tragedy to the own system is that the service area operating budgets are very utility based only, and there's not a lot of budget lines, and they're heavily scrutinized by every end of it, to the point there's not a lot of fat to cut inside your operating fund. And that's where we get issues of, there's just not a lot where we can cut down to find the money.
I mean, the only thing that I see here with the irrigation repair is just 1250, which we haven't used. But then we also have gutter cleaning, which is $4,600. And we have 2, that is 1 time a year.
Which we did talk about.
Yeah.
Because there are a few things you got.
You
come up
when
with
you
a
start-
fourth thing.
You can, and when you start dipping at some of those, you start going against your governing documents and charter and what are the responsibilities by your bylaws to the association. We have to provide those services. Because those are part of what you're.
it doesn't say when, but it doesn't say when. It's just that you have to provide them. So you could conceivably table, and we've seen that with Academy Row and others, that think that, so, but they may not need the gutter cleaning this year. They'll push it to next year to keep those funds and prioritize for landscaping or other initiatives. So they have the discretion though, because I believe the bylaws don't indicate that you need X number per year. It's
can't.
just that
When we do, it would need to be very publicly explained that that's happening, and that at that point it would be, you know, the Crow Board and the committee are recommending that, as then if there's a request for gutter cleaning, my downspouts clogged, I have a violation for my for mildew on my porch, you're between cycles, and in between cycles, it's on the homeowner. So by not filling these, you could say, contractual obligations, it does put those individual costs on the homeowner and the association. It's between cycles, and the committee and board with board approval approved to delay those cycles. So you can do that. It just puts any issues that occur onto the homeowner, which you can do, but that often brings very, very difficult circumstances as those homeowners become quite upset.
Well, if we got them all to agree to it, or a majority to agree to it, then this is what they signed up for.
Yeah, you can. I mean, we can do all of that, and you're gonna free up for $2,000-3,000, which still you can't. I would recommend using, because you still don't have enough to cover monthly. You're still scraping monthly expenses.
Wouldn't you want to know what the order of magnitude of what we're talking about is before you make it real hard to see?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I want us to get pushing on this. I don't think, and we're not gonna move any further with discussions on special assessments. It's not something we're going to the board with. But we wanted to, that's not a word we bring up often. We want to not use those words often since it is something that was slightly being discussed with a committee. We wanted to make it very, clear to the service area as a whole of when did these conversations start happening? That way, no one's caught off guard. If 6 months down the road, further down the line, things happen, they say, well, when did this start happening? This is when we started conversations, even though we did not plan to act on it at all at this point. I think with that, we'll be kicked out, I'm sure, shortly. Is there any final items from the committee? Now, I know we're gonna see you in just a week's time anyway, but I wanted to make sure we scheduled some time just to really do this, as well as I wanted to understand where we were with this and what the committee was wanting to send this out in an aligned manner.
Yeah, it needs to be focused on.
I did want to ask, with regard to going back to Mattamy, and you don't have to do it now, but if you can come back to us as to how that's gonna look like. Like, how are we going to pursue this with Mattamy? Who's involved? Should it be GM? Should Crowell be involved? What are the next steps to do that? Very clear steps on how we're gonna do that. Not just somebody might reach out to Jennifer and that's as far as we go.
Also, can it be brought up to the board for cost sharing? If they took over the property, they should bear some of the onus for this.
Some of the responsibility.
I think that, yeah, once we get results of the RFP.
I'm sure we'd all be happy with a cost share.
We can say.
You know, Matt says, well, cost share would be fair. I can say, all right, yeah, this just happens mess up, but I think it's okay. And now let's do stuff with everything and I'm free and clear.
So if I'm hearing that correctly, sorry, I just want to jump in. So Kathleen, if I heard you correctly, Catherine.
Yes.
The ask is potentially to ask the board or CROA to take on some of that cost because of the turnover, because this wasn't identified. Am I hearing that?
Yes.
Okay.
Because even though they were forced to take it over, that doesn't mean everything was properly done. It wasn't in proper working order. There were pressure issues from the beginning. And now the responsibility is shifted onto the homeowner. Even though if it was our own property, we'd say, no, you need to fix it.
And Charles, this is an addendum to a request that's on your packet tomorrow from this committee of the additional engineering expenses once we start accepting more turnovers.
Yeah, I saw that on the packet. I mean, I think we obviously will need counsel to opine on something like that. And then obviously, I mean, it's certainly something I think we should talk about. I mean, it seems like there's going to be lead time on some of these conversations anyway. So I think we should put that on the radar, Jacob. We could talk about that.
Thank you.
Thanks,
You're welcome. You're welcome.
All right. With that, thank you all for your time today. Thank you for coming as well. We appreciate it.
Yes.
I'll second.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Charles. This is more than most.
Today.
Really?
More than most.
And nobody wants to.
Wait, until you send out that spec assessment.